We've all been there. You see an incredible trailer, the promises from developers sound too good to be true, and you find yourself counting down the days until the game's release. But when the moment finally arrives, the game turns out to be a massive disappointment, if not an outright scam. Today we dive into 10 games what, despite all the hype, failed to deliver on the promises and left players feeling scammed. These games didn't just underperform, they failed on such a scale that many players still talk about them with disbelief. Grab your snacks, hit the subscribe button, and let's get into it. First game is No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky was one of the most anticipated games of 2016, and for good reason. The trailers teased an infinity, procedurally generated universe with countless planets to explore. Each of those planets was promised to be full of unique life forms, environments, and mysterious. Players were excited about the idea of jumping in their spaceship, flying to any planet they could see, and encountering things no one else had ever seen before. Sean Murray, the face of Hello Games, appeared in countless interviews promising an experience what sounded almost too good to be true: multiplayer interaction, deep exploration, and endless discovery. But when the game finally launched, it became clear what No Man's Sky was a shell of what was promised. Planets were procedurally generated, yes, but they were often barren or filled with repetitive environments and life forms. The universe, instead of feeling vast and alive, felt empty. And what about the multiplayer aspect? That was non-existent. Players couldn't find each other in the game, even if they landed on the same planet at the same time. The backlash was served. Gamers felt misled, accusing Hello Games of lying about key features. To Hello Games' credit, they worked tirelessly over the next few years to turn things around. Through numerous updates, the game slowly began to resemble what was initially promised. But for many players, the damage was done. The launch of No Man's Sky remains one of the most infamous in gaming history. A cautionary tale of overpromising and underdelivering. Second game is Cyberpunk 2077. When it comes to hype, few games can rival Cyberpunk 2077. Developed by CD Projekt Red, the team behind the critically acclaimed The Witcher 3, expectation for Cyberpunk were sky high. The trailers painted a picture of a rich, vibrant open world set in the futuristic Night City, filled with deep narrative choices, immersive gameplay, and cutting-edge graphics. Fans waited for years, and when Keanu Reeves himself appeared on stage at E3 declaring "You're breathtaking," the hype reached fever pitch. However, the reality of Cyberpunk 2077 was far less breathtaking. Upon release, the game was riddled with bugs, game-breaking bugs what made it unplayable for many, especially on last-gen consoles like the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Visual glitches, constant crashes, and terrible performance marred what was supposed to be a groundbreaking title. And it wasn't just the technical issues what disappointed. The AI was underwhelming. The open world lacked the depth and interactivity what had been teased, and many of the promised features simply weren't there. CD Projekt Red's reputation took a massive hit. Sony even removed the game from its digital storefront, a rare and dramatic move. All subsequent patches have improved the game. Many players feel the game still falls short of the vision what was sold to them. The lesson here: no matter how great the marketing, delivering a broken game is a surefire way to lose the trust of your fanbase. Third game is Aliens Colonial Marines. Few games have had such a disastrous gap between expectations and reality as Aliens Colonial Marines. Set in the iconic Aliens universe, this game promised to capture the tense, terrifying atmosphere of the films. Fans, we told, would be fighting for survival against their xenomorphs, using squad tactics and advanced weaponry to outsmart an intelligent enemy AI, what would stalk them through dark corridors. The early trailers showed off stunning graphics, immersive lighting, the intense action, making it look like the perfect game for Aliens fans. But what players got was something entirely different. On launch day, it became immediately apparent what Alien's Colonial Marines was a mess. The graphics were nowhere near the quality shown in trailers, and the AI was a joke, far from being intelligent and cunning. The xenomorphs would often run headfirst into walls or simply stand still. The game was riddled with bugs, and the level design was bland and inspired. It felt like the developers had barely tried, and players were left wondering how such a beloved franchise could be treated with such disrespect. The truth behind the game's failure is even more shocking. It was later revelated what development had been outsourced to Multiply Studios, and Gearbox Software, who were supposed to be leading the project, had allegedly diverted resources to work on their own game, Borderlands 2. Lawsuits followed, and Alien's Colonial Marines become a prime example of how bad management and false advertising can destroy a game's reputation. Fourth game is Anthem. BioWare, once known for creating some of the best RPGs of all time like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, promised to reinvent the online multiplayer experience with Anthem. The concept seemed fantastic. Players acting as freelancers would don customizable exosuits called javelins and explore a massive shared world filled with dynamic events, enemies and treasures. The flight mechanics in particular looking stunning. The idea of flying around an open world in your own Iron Man-like suit had players drooling. And being a BioWare game, fans expected a deep, narrative-driven experience with engaging characters and choices. Unfortunately, Anthem was a disaster on release. While the flying mechanics were fun, they couldn't make up for the game's many flaws. The world felt empty, the story was shallow, and the mission design was repetitive. Worst of all, there was barely any meaningful end-game content, something critical for any live service game. Players quickly released what once they finished the main story, there was little reason to continue playing. The development of Anthem was reportedly plagued by issues, internal conflicts, a lack of clear direction, and constant reworks meant what the final product felt unfinished. EA and BioWare promised to overhaul the game with something called Anthem Next, but in early 2021 it was officially cancelled. Anthem is now seen as a prime example of how not to launch a live service game, leaving a stain on BioWare's once stellar reputation. Fifth game is Fallout 76. When Bethesda announced Fallout 76, fans of the series were cautiously optimistic. An online multiplayer Fallout game, where you could explore the wasteland with friends, sounded intriguing, but many were worried about how the traditional single-player RPG elements would translate to a multiplayer setting. Bethesda assured players that Fallout 76 would retain the series' signature depth and storytelling, while adding a new social dimension. But what followed was one of the most disastrous launches in modern gaming history. Fallout 76 launched in an unplayable state for many. The game was riddled with bugs, from minor glitches to game-breaking issues that caused crashes and loss of progress. The world, which was supposed to feel alive with our players, felt empty and barren. The absence of NPCs made the game world feel lifeless, and the multiplayer interactions were minimal at best. On top of that, the PvP mechanics were clunky, and there was little to do in the post-apocalyptic wasteland once you completed the main quests. The backlash was swift and brutal. Bethesda's response didn't help, as they launched a subscription service for Fallout 76, Fallout First, which only angered players further. The game's reputation was so bad that it became a meme in the gaming community. While Bethesda has made improvements through updates and expansions, Fallout 76 will always be remembered as one of the worst launches in gaming history. Sixth game is Godus. When Peter Molyneux, the visionary behind games like Populnews and Fable, launched a Kickstarter campaign for Godus, fans were excited. Molyneux had a reputation for being ambitious, and he promised that Godus would be the ultimate good game, blending elements of creation, exploration and interaction with followers. It would allow players to shape the world as they saw fit, guiding civilizations from the Stone Age to the future, with deep mechanics and meaningful player choices. But what players got was a shallow mobile-like game, with little of the depth what Molyneux had promised. The PC version of Godus was half-baked, with unfinished mechanics, frustrating timers, and barely any challenge. Worse yet, the game seemed to be abandoned, with updates and communication from the development team coming to a halt. Backers who had invested money through Kickstarter felt betrayed, as many of the features promising during the campaign were never delivered. Molyneux's reputation took a massive hit, and Godus became a symbol of broken promises in the gaming industry. The game is still technically available, but for many it serves as a reminder of the danger of overpromising and under-delivering in the crowdfunding era. Seventh game is Mighty No. 9. Created by Katie Inafune, the mastermind behind Mega Man, Mighty No. 9 was hailed as the spiritual successor to the classic platforming series. Fans eagerly backed the game on Kickstarter, raising millions of dollars to bring Inafune's vision to life. The trailers promised fast-paced, challenging platforming action with a nostalgic nod to the Mega Man franchise. It was supposed to be the return of classic gaming, led by one of the industry's most respected figures. But when the game was finally released, it was a massive disappointment. The graphics were outdated, the controls felt clunky, and the level design was uninspired. Worse yet, the charm and creativity what defined Mega Man were nowhere to be found. Mighty No. 9 felt like a pale imitation of the classic games it sought to emulate. Fans who had poured money into the Kickstarter campaign were outgraded, feeling what they had been scammed by a project what failed to live up to its promises. Eighth game is the Culling 2. When the Culling first launched, it was one of the earliest entries into the battle royale genre, and it garnered a small but passionate fan base. The game's unique melee combat and strategic gameplay set it apart from other battle royale games that focused primarily on gunplay. However, instead of building on that success, the developers made a series of baffling changes that alienated their player base. But the real disaster came with the release of the Culling 2. The sequel abandoned everything what made the first game unique. Instead of focusing on the melee combat what players loved, the Culling 2 tried to mimic more popular game like PUBG, but without any of the polish or depth. The graphics were dated, the gameplay was clunky, and the servers were nearly empty for day one. The backlash was so severe that the developers pulled the game from sale just days after its release. In an attempt to salvage their reputation, the developers promised to return to the original Culling formula. But by then, the damage was done. The Culling 2 is now remembered as one of the quickest and most embarrassing failures in gaming history. A sequel what no one asked for, and even fewer played. Ninth game is LawBreakers. Cliff Bleszinski, the creator of Gears of War, aimed to make a big splash with his new multiplayer shooter, LawBreakers. The game promised fast-paced, gravity-defying combat with unique character classes and abilities. In a market dominated by games like Overwatch, LawBreakers sought to carve out its niche with skill-based gameplay and a more mature tone. The trailers made the game look like a thrilling blend of verticality and chaos, and there was significant excitement around its release. However, when LawBreakers launched, it struggled to find an audience. Despite positive reviews praising the game's mechanics, the player base dwindled quickly. One of the biggest issues was timing. LawBreakers was released during the height of Overwatch popularity, and it simply couldn't compete. The game's steep learning curve also made it difficult for casual players to enjoy, and without a dedicated player base, the game's service became ghost towns. Bleszinski eventually admitted what LawBreakers failed because they didn't pivot correctly in the highly competitive market. Despite its potential, LawBreakers is now seen as one of the most notable multiplayer flops in recent memory. The servers were shut down just a year after launch, and Bleszinski has since stepped away from game development entirely. And last game in our list is Duke Nukem Forever. Duke Nukem Forever holds the infamous title of having one of the longest development cycles in gaming history, 14 years to be exact. Fans of the original Duke Nukem 3D were eager for the return of the wisecracking alien blasting hero. Over the years, trailers and screenshots would occasionally surface, teasing players with the promise what Duke Nukem Forever was finally coming. But with each delay, expectation grew, and by the time the game actually launched in 2011, it was already doomed. The final product was nothing short of a disaster. The graphics were severely outdated, the gameplay felt clunky, and the humor what had once been edgy in the 19s now felt cringe-worthy and out of place. It was as if the game had been frozen in time, released without any regard for the advancements made in the shooter genre over the previous decade. Critics and players alike tore the game apart, and Duke Nukem Forever quickly became a punchline rather than a success. The development hell what Duke Nukem Forever went through became a cautionary tale for developers anywhere. Sometimes it's better to let a project die rather than force it into existence. Despite its legendary status, Duke Nukem Forever will always be remembered as one of the biggest disappointments in gaming history. And there you have it, 10 games what despite all the hype left players feeling scammed. Some of these games have been redeemed through updates and patches, but the lesson remains the same. Promises don't always translate into reality. Let us know in the comments if you've ever been scammed by a game. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the gaming industry's biggest blunders.